Heavenly Father God, we just are blessed to be able to be together today and to open your word and just to hang out and sing about you. And God, we just thank you for all these things. Lord, we thank you for making us a family. We thank you for your continued work in our lives. And God, we just ask this morning that you would meet us and speak to us and help us right where we need help. And God, just help us to know you more as a result of being together. Thank you for bringing old friends back. Thank you for some visitors, and just thank you for this place. And God, just help us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, we are in Joshua chapter 3 and 4. And just to set the stage as far as where we are, Moses had led the children of Israel out of Egypt. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and Moses died. During that 40 years, God had led the children of Israel with a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. And any time that the cloud moved, the fire moved, they moved. And they followed God around wherever he decided to go. And that's how that worked. They had a tabernacle, which Moses had built there from the direction of God. And the centerpiece of that tabernacle was the Ark of the Covenant. Well, every time that they moved and the cloud would get up and take off, they would pack everything up in a certain prescribed way. And they would pack up the Ark, and they would take the Ark with them as well, and they would that procession would lead them to the next spot. Well, when they would take the Ark, it was always covered and protected. When they would carry it with the poles, and they had certain priests that carried the Ark, and they covered it up, and they went, and that's how they moved around. That's where we pick up the story today. Moses had died. Joshua had taken over the leadership according to God. God had put this on him. And they're getting ready to start a whole new chapter. They're getting ready to do things much differently. They're getting ready to cross over finally, after 40 years, they're going to get ready to cross over into the promised land. They're going to cross the Jordan from east to west. And they're going to go over and they're going to conquer the promised land. And they're going to take it over, and things are going to be a little bit different. Another thing that's going to be different is there's going to be no more pillar by day and fire by night. That's done. They're going to be led in an entirely different way. There's not going to be any more manna from heaven that had sustained them for so long. They're going to live off the bounty of the land that God had promised them. A lot of things are different now. And that's where we pick up the story here with the children of Israel. About at least 1 million people strong, getting ready to cross the Jordan River. Interesting thing about the Jordan River at this particular time was during flood stage. Have you ever lived by a river that had different stages? So basically it would have the regular flow, and then it would, in certain times of the year, spring most of the time, it would actually get bigger and flow faster and all those type of things. We lived in Hermiston. We had the Umatilla River that went through. Normally, the Umatilla River was, it was just easy. You could just walk across it in most places. But in the springtime, when it really started to flow, or if there's big rain or whatever, it would become this crazy, muddy torrent of water, and there was no way you could get across it. And that's sort of what the Jordan River was like during flood stage. It went from this placid, kind of easy, meandering river that would be very easy to get across, to this raging white water that there's no way you can get across it. And that's especially, maybe a few of you can get across it. The spies got it back and forth, but 1 million plus people, you're not getting across. And so that's where they're at as we pick up the story. They're getting ready to cross over. The river's at flood stage. This is it. It's going to happen, but how's it going to happen? And that's where we pick this up today. So, crossing over. It says there in Joshua chapter 3, verse number 1, early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan. So that's about 8 miles, they say, to where it happened there. It's where they camp before crossing over. So they go, the whole camp moves. Now remember, there's at least 1 million people strong, they said. I wasn't there, I didn't count them. But they say there's at least 1 million people. I mean, if you think about that, the city of Philadelphia is about 1.5 million people. Have you guys ever been to Philly? Anybody? A lot of people in Philly. And so you think about the whole city moving from one place to another, that many people moving in mass. I mean, it's a big operation. It's a big operation. And so they all moved about 8 miles down, and they camped right across from the city of Jericho. And Jericho, as we found out last week, is already scared out of their wits, and they know something's going on. But this entire mass of humanity moves, and early in the morning they head over, and they camp there on the other side, on the east side of the Jordan, for 3 days. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp giving orders to the people. So here's what they said to them. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Alright? Easy enough, right? So what's going to happen? As soon as you see the ark, here's the crazy thing. There's a lot of scholars, and I'm not one of them, but they tell me... Does that come as a shock to any of you? Anyway, you look like that was just... You took that way too easy. But anyway, so there was... They say that this was probably the first time that anybody besides the priests that were able to actually set up the tabernacle and all that, this was the first time probably that the people actually saw the ark. It's probably the first time they actually saw it out for everybody to see. It was gold. It was a little box about it wasn't very big, I forget exact dimensions, but like 3 feet by 3 feet by 1.5 feet deep or whatever. It wasn't that big, but it had these cherubim up on the top with the wings coming over and touch, and it was all glimmering gold, and the sun was shining, no doubt, and they could see this thing, and it would be the first time they had ever seen it. And so it says, when you see that, follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. Remember, this is a whole new way of doing things. This is a whole new way. Before, they just followed the cloud. They followed the fire. And as soon as it moved, they moved. And they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years. That's how it happened. Well, now things are changing. It's a whole new way. How many of you have ever been on one of those? You thought life was taking you one direction, everything was kind of easy, you had your routine down pat, and then life all of a sudden takes you in a whole different direction. Right? That's sort of where they're at here. So, they're going in a whole different direction. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits. That's about 3,000 feet, 3,500 feet, half a mile or so. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Alright? So we got it? Everybody? We got what we're doing? They're taking off with the ark. As soon as they see it, we're going to wait about half a mile. They're going to take off. We're going to be able to see the little gleaming thing out there, and we're going to follow it. Alright? Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. There's a certain ways that they consecrated themselves. They stayed away from certain things, from certain activities, and they set themselves apart for what God was getting ready to do. This was a big moment in the history of Israel and the history of our story. This is a big moment. The children of Israel crossing into the promised land and conquering the land and all that happens as a result of that. That's happening right here, right now in this story. Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of it. So here they go, right? They're heading out. This is it. They're going to actually go into the promised land. Now remember, for 40 years they wandered around, and every man from 20 years old and up had died. So this is a whole new generation of people. Some of them were small enough that they can remember the crossing of the Red Sea and Egypt, but most of the men had passed away. Most of them had died. And now they're getting ready to cross over into the promised land, this thing they'd heard about for an entire generation, and here they go. Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel. He's the new leader. He's going to exalt Joshua so that the people know that God is with Joshua just like he was with Moses. And he says, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. I got ahead of myself there. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. Now remember, this thing is flowing pretty quick. It's flood stage during harvest. And so he says what they're going to do is they're going to go and they're going to step down into the river, and as soon as they step down, something's going to happen. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Alright? This is how you know it's going to happen. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. So they go and they take the 12 tribes, they choose one guy. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So remember you guys remember the story of the Red Sea. Remember what happened in the Red Sea when they go and Moses lifts up his staff, and what happens? The wind comes up and the waters part. You remember that story? And they go through. The waters are parted and they walk in between. This is different. They're going to go and they're going to stand, and God, his presence is with the Ark of the Covenant, and that represents his presence on earth, and no power can stand against who he is. And as soon as he steps foot in the river is going to stop, because the river can't overtake him, and it's going to pile up in a heap. Now this would be interesting, because if you think about it, it just keeps piling up, piling up, piling up. This heap is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That'd be quite the scene. And everything down below just dries up because there's no more water going through it. Right? So that's sort of the difference here. That's the scene. As soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in there, it's going to stand up in a heap. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, so they're breaking camp, they're getting ready to go over, this is it. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them, just like prescribed. You guys tracking with me? I will get to a point here eventually, if you're lucky. All right, here we go. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. So the water from upstream, as soon as they step in, the water from upstream stops flowing. That's it. It's not flowing anymore. God's got other business to take care of here. He's got to get 1 million people across, and this is how he's going to do it. Because he can do whatever he wants. He's got creator rights, right? So he stops it, they step in, and piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam. It's the only time this is mentioned. They say it's about 17, 19 miles north in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the water piles up, I don't know how many miles back before them, and everything just dries up so they can just go across during flood stage. That's pretty cool, right? That's pretty amazing. That's a really neat story, so check it out. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Now remember, Jericho, they're watching this from their walls, and they're thinking, you've got to be kidding me. I'm assuming they're thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Right? I mean, we already knew that their God was strong, and they had beat Og and Bashan on the other side of the river. And by the way, Christoph, have you thought that through it at all from last week? Maybe your kid Og? I don't know. I just throwing it out there. But anyway, so the whole thing, and they're looking out, and they're wondering what's going to happen when this giant horde of people get across, and all of a sudden they look out, and the river's dried up, and they're just walking across the Jordan. They have to be thinking at that point in time, all right, this is over. We're done. Right? So the people crossed over the opposite of Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground. So the Ark comes, they stop in the middle of the Jordan with the Ark on display, and everybody walks past it. Everybody walks past it as they go across. And they see this magnificent box that represents the presence of God, the judgment of God, the place on earth where God chose to dwell, right here at the mercy seat. And all that represents is sitting right here for everybody to see. And it said they stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. 1,000,000+ people, they say, walk past this ark. The priests are standing there holding it. Who knows how long it took. But they all can walk by and they all can see that wow, this is amazing. Look at this. Our God is amazing. How many of you have had situations in your life where God has done something in your life where you're just like, I mean, God is... I had nothing to do with this. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have made it happen. This is clearly God's work, and it is amazing. How many of you have ever had that happen? You're just blown away by God. Blown away by God. Yeah, that happens to us. I had a friend of mine, and we're friends, but have you ever had a friend that kind of drives you crazy? Most of my friends have one. But have you ever had a friend that drives you crazy? Right? And I had this friend, and he was really into like miracles, right? And he went to this church, and one summer they went on this, they called it a Raising the Dead mission trip. Look, I don't know. I wasn't there, but when he got back, he told me that they were in Oregon. They went all around Oregon, and they had 8 people raised from the dead on this mission trip. I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I was like, well, my question was, well, where's the videotape? Or the coroner saying, dude, this guy was dead. Or the embalmer saying, hey, I took all this guy's blood out. And it just drove me crazy. It absolutely drove me crazy. And my other question was, is there a statute of limitations on dead raising? Because, I'm not trying to make fun of it, but I was. But I shouldn't. But I did. I was confused. But he asked me this question through that whole thing, and I don't know what all happened. Maybe it happened. I don't think that's even part of what God does. Maybe if he wanted to, he definitely could. I've just never seen it. I sure didn't hear about 8 in Oregon in the summer of 2012 happening, but whatever. But he did ask me a question that made me think through that whole conversation. He said, have you ever seen a miracle? And I was like, that's a good question. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, totally. I have. I've seen a miracle. And he said, what was it? And I said, God saved me. And you know what? I started thinking, you know what? If God could do that, because I know me, and I just know me, and you got to trust me on this. It's not always pretty, or ever pretty, or whatever. But if He could save me, sure, He could raise whoever up physically from the dead He wants. He gave me eternal life. And I started thinking, that really is a miracle. That should blow us all away. That should make us all stop and think, I know God. I know God. I don't know anybody famous. I mean, sorry, present company excluded. I mean, I don't know I've never got a call from any president to ask my opinion about anything. I've never got a call from anybody in Hollywood to ask me about anything. I don't have any friends that are in even like, sports. I don't know anybody famous. But God saved me. I know God, and I'm on my way to heaven because of what Jesus did for me. That should blow us all away. That should blow us all away. That should be bigger in our heads than anything God could ever do, any miracle He could perform, anything else that He could ever do that did anything physically. That should just blow us out of the water that we know God. Amen? And this is sort of this type of thing, right? They're walking past and they're like, man, this river is backing up. This is amazing. This is the most, I can't believe this. I'm walking and there's no water in the river anymore. It's not flowing anymore. This beautiful box that represents the presence of God is sitting here and we're walking across on dry land. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So they all walk past until everybody's completely crossed. That's chapter 3. Now chapter 4 comes this. Telling the story. Telling the story. Now, hang on, we'll get to it in just a second. Here we go. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people. So they're all crossed over. It says, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you will stay tonight. And they're going to Gilgal. Gilgal is sort of their home base while they're conquering the land. They're headed there. So they're going to carry with them 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan. All right? You guys tracking with me? So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites to serve as a sign among you. So, right, one guy from each tribe, each got a big stone on his shoulder, and they're carrying him to Gilgal with them. All right, you guys with it? In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. So they're going to set these stones up as a memorial or as a reminder of the good and amazing and mind-blowing thing that God did so they can pass the goodness of the Lord on from one generation to the next. Okay? We're going to come back to that in just a minute. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. They took them all the way to the camp. They set them up. All right, that's one memorial. That's one memorial. Joshua set up the 12 stones. Now this is where I differ with the NIV a little bit. There's sometimes when that happens, right? Where we have a particular version of the Bible that they say things a little wonky, I think. But who am I, right? Anyway, in the King James, the ESV, the other versions, this says that Joshua didn't set up those 12 stones, but Joshua had 12 additional stones set up in the middle of the Jordan. Because look how it reads. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they are there to this day. This is a different set of 12 stones. Joshua had set up in the middle of the river. I wonder if they're still there. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? I'm sure they're still there. I just wonder if they're still together or what. Anyhow, it doesn't really matter. But he had them set up in a place where what? Where as soon as the river came back across, no one would ever see them again. Right? So there's one memorial that's set out for everybody to see, and there's another one deep in the midst of the river where the miracle took place. Alright, so keep those two things in mind. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to the other side while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over, ready for battle, in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. Again, these were the ones that asked for the land on the other side of the Jordan. And they said they would fight, and then they would go back and get their land. Different story, but that's what that's about. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they stood in awe of Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests carrying the ark of the covenant law to come up out of the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priests, come up out of the Jordan, and the priests came up out of the river, carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. On the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, in the future when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, so that you might always fear the Lord your God. We're done. All right. Now, what was that all about? How do we, what does this mean to us, I guess? Remember the two memorials. What had happened? Something that blew them out of the water. And all of us said we've had those experiences with the Lord. All of us said God's done something in our lives, with our lives, through our lives, to our lives, that has made us stop and take note and be in awe and be blown away by what God has done. Now notice the two different memorials. One is seen and one is not seen. One is a memory. One is something that you hold deep inside your heart. One is in a place that is deep within you that brings you nourishment, that brings you spiritual comfort, and brings you just remembering it in your contemplative spaces, being once again blown away by the awesomeness of God. And those type of memories and memorials and remembrances are important to our individuality, to who we are, to our individual walk with Christ, and for our nourishment as we walk through this life. Remembering in deep places and being reminded of what God has done for us. Do we have things like that? I was thinking about this. Like, what is the... I remember just so many cool things that God's done that I've never told people the stories. I mean, they're in here, and I think of them, and I take great comfort in the fact that they happen. But there's two sides to this. Here's the truth of the matter. All of us need encouragement. All of us go through difficult times. All of us struggle. All of us need each other. And we don't just need to draw from our own personal memories of something that happened that's kind of invisible to everybody else, but we just draw. We need to tell our story to each other, and we need to tell our stories to our children, the stories of how good and amazing and awesome that God is. So that we not only draw from the invisible recesses of who we are as a resource of encouragement, but we live a life in a way that brings up questions so we can tell the story of God to others. You know, it's like this. How many of you have been to my office? Like 4 of you. You're all welcome to my office. It's not the most fun place in the world. Some of you have gotten called in there in principal-like fashion. Others, you just come to visit. It's up to you. It doesn't matter. But when you come to my office, I'm just kidding. It's open to everybody. You can come in. I got a couple couches. You can take a nap if you want, whatever. We're good. In my office, I've got one wall, and on the wall there is basically like a curtain rod. There's a curtain rod, and hanging on that curtain rod are a couple of dozen scarves. A couple of dozen scarves are hanging on that wall. I'm a soccer fan. I love soccer. My team won this morning. Man United beat Chelsea. Sorry, Mark. 2-1 this morning. Hope you didn't DVR it. In your face. All right. So anyway, 75th minute goal by Jesse Lingard. I was watching this getting ready this morning. Man, I was excited. I love soccer. You know how you commemorate soccer as a fan? Is every time you go to a game, you buy a scarf. So my scarf wall is a bunch of memories of different soccer games that I've been to, or my friends have been to, or whatever. And all those different scarves tell a story. And they remind me of those things that happened. They remind me. And I'm dying for somebody one day to come in and go, what are all these scarves about? So I can say, you see this one? That's when I went to see Man U play up in Seattle. You see this one? That's when I went to see the U.S. men's national team play Panama up in Seattle, the year they actually qualified. You see these three? These are the three my son brought me back from Europe this year. You see this one? This is the one that I made Steve suffer through in Berlin when we went to Berlin to watch a soccer game. I got them all. I'll tell you the stories. I love them. They remind me, and I'm dying to tell somebody else about it. Here's the thing. What has God done for us? All the amazing things that He does for us on a daily basis, and we keep them all. We don't set up anything. We don't put reminders out. I need to hear the story of God working through you. I need to hear what's going on in your life. You need to hear what's going on in my life, what God's doing, because what He's doing is amazing. It's awe-inspiring. It has nothing to do with our ability. It has everything to do with Him, and He's doing it through us, and we get a chance to watch Him work, but we get to tell the story of what He's doing. Now here's the crazy thing. We need to hear it from each other. But here's the thing. My kids need to hear how God's working and how God has worked for me. My kids need to hear it from me, and my kids need to hear it from you. And we need to pass these stories of God working on from one generation to the next, so that when the kids look and they see our lives, or they see a picture, or they see a reminder, or they see us act a certain way, they see us show grace when there's no way we should show grace, they see us not seek vengeance when we have every right to seek vengeance, they see us fall and trust God and pray, read our Bibles, whatever it is it happens to be that we're doing, and they say, why are you doing that for? Let me tell you, son. Let me tell you, daughter. Let me share this story of what God did. Man, it's amazing. It's awesome. It's not about sitting in a church listening to some boring guy rattle on about some book I don't understand. This is about a real God that wrote us a real love story that we get to sit down and see how He worked all through the generations. But it's even better than that. He works in us today. And here's what He did for me. And here's some of the stories that He's done in my life. And here's how I've seen Him work. We need to set up those memorials and not just sit on them. There's two aspects of it. There's the one that nobody can see that just is sitting as a well deep within us, but it needs to come out. And we need the other side of it, which is out there, so that when questions are asked, when we're raising our kids, when we're helping each other, we tell our stories of God's grace working in and through us, so that the next generation can know and be awestruck and be blown away by how good God is. Because here's the thing. As you go through the end, and after Joshua, what's the next book? Anybody know? Judges. You know what the first line of the book of Judges is? Joshua died, and that generation with him died, and the next generation rose up who knew not the Lord their God. You know what? The kids are going to drive you crazy. Our kids are going to drive you. You're going to look at them and say they get their noses stuck in their phones and they're all about social media. It drives me nuts. There's something wrong with that. I'm trying to work up a sermon about it. I don't like it. It needs some face-to-face and talking and all that stuff. You little bratty kids up there. Look at y'all on your phone. But anyway. I'm just kidding. We love you, man. We love you. Even though you're weird. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just kidding. Not really. Anyhow. But here's the thing. You know what? They don't need a lecture on social media. They don't need, although I give them a lot. They don't need these things. They don't need, what they need, and my kids need, are me to share with them the true stories that happened to me, that God has done in my life, to bolster the stories that we tell about Jesus and God working throughout the Bible. Because they're no different. They're the same. It's the same God working through the same type of people, the same flesh and blood. And if our children grow up and they don't know God, guess what? It's not because God isn't awesome. It's because we haven't told them how awesome He is. They may reject Him, they may not like it, but let's not let them get out of here without them hearing that it's not about a club where we meet at on Sundays and just talk for a long time and get bored and go away. This is not what this is about. This story is about us being changed by an awesome God and going out and seeing Him work and change lives and transform us. And we need to set up those memorials deep within us and then out somehow to when the questions are asked, when the kids come up and say, why are you doing this? What's this all about? Why are we doing this? We share the amazing story of God working in our lives. Listen, I want to hear your story. There's power in your story, but it's not in you. The power in your story is the fact that you're just like me, but God is using you to see and do amazing things that blow us all away, that make us stand in awe of God. So let's do this. Let's in our hearts know that God is amazing and God is awesome, but let's not be shy to tell our generation and the next generation and the generation after that the things that God has done in our lives so that they and we can continue to stand in awe of our awesome, loving, kind, grace-filled, miracle-working God. Amen? Dear Heavenly Father God, we just come before you. Once again, God, just us. Normal flesh and blood people, Lord, that you have transformed. And God, we just ask that as you continue to work in our lives and give us breath and let us see amazing things happen in our midst. God, give us the courage not just to draw inspiration from ourselves from deep within, but God, give us the courage to tell the story of your grandeur and your awesomeness and your working in our lives to all who will listen. And to share with the next generation and the generation after that just how awesome, not only that you were in the Bible, which blows us all away, but God, that you're still working in our lives today. And how nobody that's in this room that we're related to ever get out of this place without knowing that what we think of you, that we are blown away by you, whether they are or not, Lord. May they hear the stories of how amazing you are. Give us the courage to tell your story in us. God, give us the courage to live in a way that prompts questions to be asked. Unusual love, unusual grace, unusual mercy. God, so that people will say, why would you do that? Give us opportunity to tell your story in our lives so that the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that can know and be blown away by how awesome you are. In Jesus' name, amen.